each screaming, "Chocolate!" We done? We sure? Are you really sure? Because I'm now going to have to say it again. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet, read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Great Journey, written by FarmWitch4275. An eternal void of nothingness was what surrounded them for countless millennia. Thousands of the Katakani peoples had been asleep in their Aetherium-powered caskets for so long. The loss of their home world now seems little more than a broken memory. The infinite void of space seemingly supplied them with a near-infinite gift of the great Aetherium they used to power their great ships. Many a year ago, a doom came to their world, a great, terrible doom. Mages, sages, and great masters of rock and metal came together to create a solution. It took all they had and launched into the sky a great metal fleet powered by Aetherium, instead of the great sails that powered their ships of old. A fleet of 100 great ships set sails into the skies a month before the world of Karatha was lost. A great and powerful detonation, rendering it a broken husk. Each vessel expertly crafted and customized to an absurd degree, each one powered by great engines that could siphon the very Aetherium out of the universe itself, convert it into fuel, and blast with a force to catapult them into the beyond. Each ship surrounded by a bubble, a great barrier to protect them from the horrors of the void. At the head of the fleet proudly sat the Retribution's gaze. Since that terrible day, the fleet stays silent, sailing in the void. Ghosts and bound spirits, unrestful for eternity, bound to keep vessels functioning and away from danger. The fleet could hold in comfort and security 100,000 of their people, as undignified as it was to be stacked on top of each other like boxes at a market. It was still safety. As saddened as they were to leave behind millions of souls, the small contingent was all they could muster in the short time they had. Every 4 years, they would be awoken from their caskets to celebrate the Great Conjunction, a time of happiness and peace, where they would feast and forge new alliances. The celebration was used to fill their bellies and secure their souls from the Aether's eternal grasp through rituals and spells. Then, when the party was over and the mess cleaned, they would return to their caskets and sleep once more. Each celebration would feed their bodies with food supply conjured by the mages, cooked by the chefs, and eaten by all present, young or old, peasant or king. It would last barely a week. Each casket would act as a chamber where the occupant would be in a state of time sleep. The body would still progress in age, losing fat and tissue, but at such a staggeringly low rate, the effect would be negligible in comparison to actual time. Each man or woman would enter fat and happy, and exit 4 years after, empty-bellied but healthy. The mages would use the great Aetherium crystals and tuning libraries to gather together a grand feast, conjuring food from the oblivion and feeding them all with it. The food was basic and simple, but it was greatly appreciated by all present. The vast amount of Aetherium gathered by the crystals in their close proximity to the void ensured they could happily sail in the void for many, many more millions of years if they so needed to. Then one day, a great boon arrived, a gift from the gods. The Retribution found an object. It was a door. A massive, massive door. Flight crews were awoken from their caskets, engineers readied to their stations, and mustered to arm the few cannons they had. The massive door was bigger than Retribution by 3 times and could comfortably fit inside it. The object in which the door was lodged was truly massive, stretching from horizon to horizon, distinct bumps breaking the otherwise flat gray metal landscape. A mage stood atop a pedestal at the front of the Retribution. Shield around them rippled with activity as he cast a spell, a short incantation. The spell failed. The door held fast, a symbol of keep clear refusing them entry. The bright orange stripes surrounding and crisscrossing the door shimmered, as if to mock him. The mage would dare not bring defeat to his people, and struck out in anger. A bolt of lightning from the skies of the mother world itself flashed from his mighty staff and hit a small object to its left. Lights, bright red lights, appeared at each of the four corners of the door, spinning around and around, as if to warn. Then the lights turned green, and ceased their rotation. The doors yielded and opened. Quickly, as fast as they could, the great engines spooled up, belched fire behind them as the great fleet charged forth into the new opening. They had finally reached it, the great land they were promised so very long ago. Each ship going through what appeared to be a thin sheet of pure blue light that appeared in the hull. They knew not why. All they knew was that their great journey was now over. As the last ship slid through, the door closed behind them. They were now trapped. The mages were beside themselves with sadness and worry. All was naught but pitch-black darkness, and they were dismayed. They had led their people into a trap. A great devourer, the one who brings darkness and death, had lured them into a trap. It was then the lights came on. The sight was the most beautiful sight they had ever witnessed. They were inside a massive world, many times larger than they could have imagined, and what lay before them was a forest of giant trees and giant hills, mountains of material they could use. They were clearly in a confined space, a great box, a great giant box, hundreds of kuliks high, millions of kuliks in area that could comfortably house their entire peoples for 1,000,000 generations to come. 3 great rivers ran through, hundreds of kuliks wide, with thousands of trees of all conceivable kinds, stretching from green grass to steel ceiling. This was nothing short of paradise. Each ship, as it came accustomed to the light, the great bubble shield popped, and allowed each occupant to smell clean, fresh, beautiful air for the first time in as many years as anyone could remember. The fleet forged ahead to the nearest tree, a massive tree of red bark, thick enough to house 10 entire cities for them. They would be more than comfortable here. This was the absolute essence of everything they could ask for. Of 100 ships, only 16 were kept functional, returned to their glorious warships to defend their new home. 1 was permanently anchored to serve as a monument to their great triumph. The rest was scrapped down to supply their new industry as they quickly carved through the great tree and forged a new empire. A new home was made in the large dirt pile at the tree's base and used to mine valuable minerals. The lake was flush with massive, enormous creatures that resembled fish. Each one could feed 1,000 of them, and in that great lake were tens of thousands of fish, some bigger and juicier. The local wildlife proved a challenge, but nothing that could not be tamed or reasoned with. And the giant birds and land creatures that populated this great place became mounts for work, flyers for security, travel, and beasts of burden. Soon, these flying beasts became mounts for explorers and sky dancers, and the land beasts known as mounts for warriors. Lesser and smaller beasts became farming helpers or beasts of burden that carried trade goods across vast distances. After 6 months of living, the population doubled, and a monument was commissioned by the magistrate court to commemorate the great journey. With surplus in resources due to their location and new burgeoning empire, nobody saw reason to judge, and so work began in earnest. A great site was determined, a place called Junction Box, and a monument was quickly built of stone and wood in front of this great place. Now known as the Junction, the mages and casters quickly began to use it as their headquarters. Quickly, a new guild was formed, and from this junction, an Ethereum siphon was constructed. The great pink crystal was 10 times the size of any other they had ever built. The mages' power grew, and soon they were able to manipulate the soil, and the crops grew faster and produced more food, fields never growing fallow. They had truly found paradise. War, famine, disease, hardship, anything their new home threw at them for 14 years, this, regardless of dangers, was paradise. A war had come and gone between House Asterial and House Honorus, with thousands dead before it could be found out that conspirators had gone mad and were bent on everyone's destruction. Assassins in the night slaughtered them and revealed their plans to all, stopping both wars. A great plague ravaged the countryside one day, causing the animal population to face horrible injury and an agonizing death. The Great Plague jumped to their owners, and before they knew what was happening, farm hands and stable boys started getting sick too, with the same awful disease. Quick as it came, though, it vanished, with limited side effects, but many deaths. A drought hit them. One day there was a massive shuddering of earth, and the world around them went dark for several days. In the coming months, the rains never came, and the situation became desperate. The response, the gods themselves seemed to understand their plight, and to stay the hunger and sadness, a gigantic pile of fresh food, including exotic fruits and beautiful sweetstuffs, was found outside one of the villages. A new pond seemed to have been dug, and filled with pristine, clean water. Then, one day, after 14 years of life in a new world, with minor incidents but no real problems, he came to them. On a fine, crisp morning on the 14th year, a device, a spyglass of sorts, was found outside the Elleris Kingdom's castle. Out of curiosity, a youngster looked into it. He shrieked in terror at the sight of a giant creature. The sheer size was nothing short of terrifying. The youngster immediately raised alarm, and armies were assembled in preparation. The giant suddenly began to walk towards them. It took barely a few minutes to cross the vast lands hundreds of clinks across, but strangely, as some mages noted, took great care not to step on anything. Just before reaching the front line, it stopped and sat down in a field. It was just like them, only with rounded ears and a massive size. Armies were ready to fire. One mage used a sound response spell and commanded the creature to identify itself. It responded by simply smiling and began to construct something. A strange parallel lines and steel railings placed upon the wood boards, carefully clicking them into place and setting them gently on the ground. Then, placed upon an object, it was a box, a big rectangular box with tiny wheels underneath it. He pushed a series of buttons, and the box began to move along the track. It moved with exceptional grace and speed, crossing the entirety of the track that he had built in mere seconds. He had noticed their fascination as the armies had come to rest and were watching the spectacle around them. He stopped the thing on the tracks and was simply sitting there, smiling. Finally he spoke, his voice loud and booming, heard by all across the kingdom. "Good morning. My name is Carter Tyson. I am an ambassador to the Terran Republic. Welcome aboard the TRS Oregon," he said, and simply sat there with a smile. After what seemed like an age, one apprentice mage stepped forward from the battle lines and approached, using the amplification spell to guarantee his words could be heard. "What be thy purpose, O great being, and what, pray tell, be this box that runs along the tracks?" "Well, I am an ambassador. It is my job to negotiate terms of peace. This box is what we humans call a train. We use them for mass transit and cargo freight. We figured that you might accept a small gift as our way of saying hello," it replied, taking a small book out of its pocket and pinching it gently onto the ground. "Did you create this place? Did your great constructs grow this forest?" An older, more experienced mage spoke out. "I didn't build it with my own hands, but it is owned by the people I work for. You have set up your home in one of our starships. It is an arboretum. It is essentially used for transporting small ecosystems across the void of space, so that we can plant trees on other planets," he replied and held out a large book that had pictures in it, using these pictures as a visual guide. "What is thy business, O great being? Have you come to harm us?" one soldier shouted amongst his fellows. Why would I do that? After all," he reached into another pocket and produced a bar of sweet, sweet chocolate that all people so deeply loved and placed it on the ground. "We've been helping you out all this time. Why would we want to harm?" They looked up at him with shock and surprise. 20 men on the front broke ranks suddenly and charged with careless abandon across the field, each screaming, "Chocolate!" as crazed madmen, and began to pounce upon the giant block of treat and carved it with their swords. The army's great discipline crashed into nothingness as they charged forth and assaulted the chocolate bar. The giant held a hand on the ground, and one brave soul stepped on forward and climbed onto it. The giant brought the mage up to eye level and smiled. "Well, it seems that we've won you over. Shall we discuss an alliance then?" The mage bowed in respect. "We shall be deeply honored, O great one." "Please, just call me Carson." He used his other hand, opening it for a handshake. Heavy footsteps thumped through the halls, the pristine and sterile white and grey corridors marked with various doors and signage pointing in various directions. A man, 6'1", grey-haired and grizzled, trotted calmly through the hallway with a brisk pace. He had his hands behind his back, clenching his fists out of mild annoyance, as he perceived he had more important things to do. He stood at the entrance of the hangar bay. A label above the door told him that he was in the right place. Arboretum 3 of 27, authorized entry only. Contents, freshwater deciduous forest. I hope for his sake that this was important. If this is a waste of time, you damn bet I'm gonna steal all of the tequila from the bar, he muttered to himself and pressed the button to let him in. He was greeted by the sight of a group of 7 people, 4 youngsters, 2 adults, and 1 white-haired, long-bearded old man with the name tag Jeremy on his left shoulder. He spoke. Ambassador Tyler, good to see you again. This better be good, old man. I'm in deep hell with the Mars reclamation movement. We got crap to do, Jeremy. Make it quick. Oh, it is. It very much is. But first, have you ever watched the movie The Borrowers before? Jeremy asked with a strange smile on his face. Really? Actually, yeah. I did when I was like 5 years old, I think. Watched that movie for kindergarten class project once. What does that have to do with this? Tyler stroked his beard and thought. Jeremy chuckled somewhat sadistically. Play the recording I just made, please. The monitor on the control lit up and began to play a security recording, a compilation of 14 years of work. It showed a fleet of 100 18th century sailing ships lining up at the end of cargo across the doors. Each one was no bigger than a New York City bus. The lead ship shot out some kind of electrical attack and opened the cargo bay door. After cycling the atmosphere through the cargo bay door opened and deposited them into one of the 12 arboretums. The ships moved around to a close redwood tree and started setting up shop, and what followed on the screen was about 14 years of development in the form of a montage. They tamed the various woodland animals in the arboretum as pets, service animals, and other things, using sparrows and hummingbirds as flying mounts. They built a massive crystal lattice structure in front of the junction box and seemed to use it as a place of worship. Then came a screen full of arboretum explanations and system readouts detailing how the entire light fixture system had to be replaced in order to supply a day-night cycle. The entire water table had to be stabilized and properly filtered. The koi ponds had to be slowly replaced with more easily replaced trout, and the entire fire suppression system had to be overhauled so as to not go off from residual smoke from the settlements. Cameras zoomed in on citizens living their lives, the minuscule race of humanoids barely 3 inches tall, but biologically exactly like humans, only with pointy ears. Images flashed across the screen of them, carving an entire city out of the trunk of 200-meter-high redwood tree. Smaller buildings made out of wood and carved out of stone, mined from various boulders, made up a majority of the large city, housing thousands of people. A simple life of medieval peasants in a world of magic. Ambassador Tyson was stunned silent. Seriously? It's 3183 AD, and in over 1,000 years of empty nothing, our first contacts are tiny magical space elves? Jeremy simply shrugged with a smile. Better than being alone at least. We managed to recover one of the ships after it somehow lost power and crashed into the lake. It's in the lab so that we can try to figure out how their tech works. Have you done any contact ops yet? Tyson asked, taking a look around. No. We have left various trinkets, such as watches or nuggets or iron ore lying around in inconspicuous places. We've mostly been spending our time reinforcing the hull and upgrading the life support system so that we can keep them in here. We've just run out of funding. Jeremy tiredly sat back on his seat and leaned in armrest. Any serious incidents? One more. We stopped them before they wiped each other out by using a remote-controlled drone to kill agitators and conspirators. One plague of flu that hit the squirrel population and jumped species after one of our interns dropped his water bottle into the filtration system. One serious incident was a drought and a famine that came after a meteorite struck and hit the climate control system hard, making us shut it down for 8 months. Had to go in with watering cans to keep the grass from dying and dig up new pond to keep it filled with water. Jeremy calmly explained, showing footage from various operatives during the time. Have you conducted any experiments on them? Nothing intrusive. Placing trinkets such as watches, giving them carrot seeds and seeing what they do with it. Leaving a slab of chocolate out and seeing what happens. As it turns out, they are chalk addicts. They can't get enough of the stuff. Beyond small stuff, we simply haven't had time or opportunity just because we have been keeping this facility running. Jeremy guided his attention to the shelf nearby filled with various objects, including an electric train model, scaled to fit the tiny elves. All were labeled to be used later. The ambassador sat thoughtfully for a moment. Are we good for first contact? That's why you're here, Jeremy replied. All right, give me the train, and let me go set up some track. Let's give them a gift as our first hello. Yeah, and also, your funding and personnel are doubled. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.